Thank you very much, Shanice, and thank you to everyone joining us at this time of night. So before I move on from the opening slide, I'll just pass comment on the actual picture on it, just to say, here's an introduction to Scottish agates, what subtle and beautiful things they are. This one on the opening slide is from Tayport, which is on the other side of the River Tay, opposite Dundee. And you can just see it showing these beautiful, subtle shades of blue, purple, and mauve, things of beauty. So, what's the plan for tonight? Well, I'm going to usually do acknowledgements at the end, but because they're particularly important for this presentation, I'm putting them at the beginning first and foremost. And then we move on to agates to collect or not collect. That's a bit of sort of a slightly tongue-in-cheek but true review of my attitude to collecting agates, which has varied over the years, I must admit. We'll then look at agates in Scottish historical context, just briefly looking through major landmarks of the ages. And then a very basic look at the geology and mineralogy of agates and their general distribution throughout Scotland. We'll then move on to the sort of morphology of agates, the different internal structures within them, which give rise to so many, aesthetics in the species. And then I'll work through some agate localities, some of which I've visited and some which I simply have specimens from or know of famous sites. And then we'll just finish with a very brief look at some agate collections and displays that I've had the pleasure of encountering. And then finally, to finish, we'll look at some books and websites. So if you are hooked or become interested in the subject, you know sort of where to turn in the future. So as for the acknowledgements, and this was the problem, I was asked to put this talk together for the Russell Society weekend last May when everyone gets together. And the majority of my mineral collection at the moment's in storage. And so to ask for something to be found specifically was a bit sort of like Raiders of the Lost Ark. It couldn't really be found at the moment. So in my desperation to sort of get some really decent photographs and actually specimens much better than I have in my collection, I contacted David Anderson, who I must admit I don't personally know, but I know he's a great collector of Scottish agates. And he was one of the joint authors of this book. I'll just try and put this laser pointer on. Here we are. Hopefully that's working. And also this wonderful website he administers, Scottish Agates, which I really recommend you to visit. It's fantastic. And very kindly, David's let me use pictures of my choice from his website. So the majority of these great agates you're going to see are supplied by David, but you're seeing the creme de la creme, in my opinion. So many thanks to him. And that's why I'm putting it first and foremost in this presentation. And I also, many of you'll know Roy Starkey, a well-known British mineral collector. And Roy has also supplied me with some specimen photos from his collection. He too was a bit cynical over agates at one time, like myself, but the Scottish ones, we've changed our ways. And just some evidence, these are just a few pictures I cobbled together of specimens in my own collection. So they're not very good pictures, but it proves that I do have some, despite what I'm showing you tonight. So I start off with this to collect or not collect. As I was putting the talk together, I thought of all the sort of views I've had on agates over my collecting years. And doing this plot of enthusiasm up the left against my age. I hasten to add, I'm not presently in the upper age limit. That's a projection. This is the sort of rather strange plot I got. So we begin at number one here at the bottom, and I started collecting minerals in general around about the age of 8. I got interested then. And shortly after that, I had an auntie in Bendigo in Australia, and she put together a lovely little package of Australian agates for me, which I was absolutely delighted with, as you can imagine, and my enthusiasm instantly rocketed. But then after about 2 years or so, I encountered this horrible world of, I realized a lot of these things were dyed and sort of basically fakes in some way or the other. And that really put me off them. And then I think many people, as they become, sort of more dedicated to mineral collecting, can get a sort of bit of a sniffy attitude to agates and think, oh, they're only for beginners or youngsters. And admittedly, I did poo-poo them for the best part of 40 years, probably. But everything changed in 2005 when I made my first visit to the Munich Mineral Show. And the exhibition, the special exhibition that year, was on agates. And the Royal Museum of Scotland had a wonderful display, and I was just bowled over by it. And hence my enthusiasm sort of went through the roof, really. It perhaps waned a little after that because I'd not got any and I didn't really know where to find them or buy them. But then this changed, and I began sort of finding a few dealers that had some very nice ones for purchase at quite reasonable prices too. And then I also discovered that you could still collect them if you knew where to look. So I tentatively started doing that. So my collection grew and has continued to do so. And I can only predict with my enthusiasm, it sort of gets into this football pundit territory where it breaks the 100% barrier. But I am very enthusiastic about them. I think they're just wonderful objects, and I hope you will too at the end of this talk. So going back to where my interest kicked off, here's the entrance to the Munich show in 2005 on a bit of a misty, murky autumnal morning. And the picture on the right here, you get these sort of cylindrical advertising hoardings throughout Munich. And here's the show being advertised and the special exhibition with this specimen here, which is called the hooded owl agate. And we'll see more of that in a tick. So within the show, it has 4 massive halls of minerals to wander around, and in one of them is the exhibition, and this year it was called Agate Dreams, with agates from all over the world. And here, this was sort of like the star symbol of the show, this hooded owl. And you can see what an absolutely amazing specimen it is. It really does look like a perch owl. And at the time, which is obviously over 20 years ago now, I know it was valued at about $1 million, quite remarkable for an agate. What I always think is they can't have known it was going to be like that when they cut it. Just imagine if you'd have cut it at 90 degrees like that, you'd have probably, it just might have looked ordinary for all we know. I don't know, but it is an amazing specimen. So there we are. We had agates from all around the world. There was a nice case of Australian ones, which made me recall that those I'd had from my auntie all those years before. And then innocently wandering around, there was the Edinburgh Museum, as they called it, the Royal Museum of Scotland, which of course had a purely exhibition of Scottish agates. And although I'd heard of them, I'd never really looked at them closely before. And again, apologies for this, not a great photo, but it's taken through glass in the exhibition cabinets. And for example, these were all from the famed Blue Hole, which is now a sort of legendary and lost locality. So it was just marvelous to see these things on show. And then in other cabinets, there were modern agates, and this is from an operating quarry just to the east of Dundee, our Downey quarry, which we'll see more of later. So just looking at a bit of how agates occur through Scottish history, well, they've been found at sites, in other words, used in archaeological sites used by man for at least 5,000 years or so, and perhaps even up to 7,000 years. So they've really been prized for a long time, either used as sort of simple jewelry or as a tool, as arrows or something like that. And then there is evidence too, although I don't think a lot of it, but during the Roman occupation of Scotland, the odd artifacts being found, and this ring here I show is dating from between the 1st and 2nd century, is a Scottish agate set in gold. And I've just put this main picture in because I think it's a misconception by a lot of people that the Romans didn't really get into Scotland because of Hadrian's Wall and the Antonine Wall, but they only came somewhat later. And they did sweep across Scotland, and this is a famed battle which took place near to where my house is in Inverary. Although I'm in Somerset at the moment, I do actually live in Scotland near Aberdeen, and this Roman battle, was supposed to happen there. And just skipping many centuries round to about the time of James V. Sorry about the quality of these pictures. I've just blown this up from quite a small one, but it shows you an example of agates set in gold and enamel, and quite beautiful for the time. That period of Scottish history is what we would say is the Tudor period in England, just the equivalent, really. So there's some exquisite things being made. But everything really changed, really much more up to date when you think about it, during the Napoleonic era. And during the Napoleonic Wars, France imposed a blockade on European ports to prevent British trade occurring, and of course all luxury items ground to a halt, and this included agates that were imported from Germany, probably around the Idar-Oberstein area. And so because of lack of availability through imports, people set about trying to find new sources, and quite amazingly, most of the really well-known agate localities in Scotland seem to have been found during this period when people were trying to fill this gap. So, that was very fortuitous in that sense. And then moving up to only about 20 years later, after the fall of Napoleon, Queen Victoria was crowned. And as we all know, she was a great lover of anything Scottish. She loved the country and everything to do with it. And famously, Balmoral was purchased and became a regular retreat for her and Albert and the family. And there's no doubt about it, Queen Victoria was a trendsetter, what we might call an influencer in the modern idiom. And for example, she was, I think, the first one to wear a white wedding dress, and that is still done today, and the first to have Christmas trees at Christmas. And so people, where she led, people followed. And she was very keen on jet and agate jewellery, and so it became highly fashionable, probably not only in Britain but across the world. So she really had a great input on its popularity. And it is well known that when they were in Scotland, and particularly in the Cairngorms on treks from Balmoral, they would both like to look for minerals, and possibly it is reported that some nice specimens were found by them, but maybe they were conveniently left for them to find, who knows? But they were very keen on the subject. And this sort of jewellery, which is a very nice mixture of, say, agates, cairngorm quartz, which is the smoky form of quartz from the cairngorms, jaspers, bloodstone. Bloodstone's a jasper with green with red flecks in like blood, pearls, and then gold and silver, and even granite polished. It was generally referred to as Scottish pebbles or pebble jewellery. And these are examples of beautiful examples of the craft that went on at the time. And again, about 30 years into Victoria's reign, by about 1870, about 2,000 people, which is a lot, were employed mainly in the Edinburgh district as lapidaries making this form of jewellery. Some other beautiful examples, and it's something I don't have in my collection, anything like this, and I would like one or two, really. They'd be lovely to have. But like everything, fashions rise and fall, and the popularity declined, and eventually the last of the great lapidaries, Alexander Begbie, died in 1958. But it is still practiced now, and there's still modern jewellery made, and very beautiful stuff too. And both, when I say specimens, I both mean rough agate specimens and jewellery specimens are greatly sought after now by collectors the world over. So just, again, it's a basic look at the geology and mineralogy, really. I'm not going into great detail because it's more a sort of picture show this of beautiful specimens. So I think the key thing to say is that agates are found mainly in volcanic rocks. They're quite rare in any other form, like sedimentary. And if they do occur in sedimentary, it's sort of more what we'd call a pseudomorph, where they're replacing something like, I've given an example, say, of replacing wood or coral. And we'll see some examples of coral replacements again later on. The bulk tend to be in Devonian aged lavas, and this is generally termed the old red sandstone as a stratigraphic name. And they very rarely occur in carboniferous rocks through Scotland. But also in the lavas, you get these lavas on the west coast forming some of the Western Isles, which are much younger lavas, tertiary basalts, and they're a good source for agates as well. And in the Devonian and Carboniferous, they're mainly andesitic rocks they found in, and in the tertiary volcanic rocks, they're mainly basalts. So just looking at the distribution, we can group them into these general areas. And on this major map here, I've just put in, this is the Highland Boundary Fault and the Southern Uplands Fault, which form the Midland Valley here, with the just a few markers here. Here's Edinburgh, the Forth, Dundee, Aberdeen up here, and then across on the left, Skye here down to Mull here, just to give you a general layout of the major landmarks. So starting off, we've got this area along the coast here between just into Aberdeenshire and down to Dundee, including all the classic areas around Montrose. We then have Perth and Fife incorporating that Dundee area and Stirling round there. And then across to the west, we have the Scottish Isles, as already described. And a little further south, we've got the Kintyre Peninsula here, Mull of Kintyre around here, Arran and Bute in this district, where there's some very interesting specimens come from around there. We go a bit further down to Ayrshire, Burnan, and particularly some super coastal localities. And then finally the Cheviot Hills, which I'm not really going to go into detail tonight. So just something about the mineralogy. I mentioned they found in andesites and basalts, and really just to say what those are. An andesite's it's an intermediate composition rock between a silica-poor basalt and a silica-rich rhyolite, and it's the extrusive or sort of the volcanic version, the rock that comes to surface. It's the equivalent of diorite if that remains underground, and basalt is the equivalent to is the extrusive equivalent to a gabbro. And the basalts, which occur more in the Western Isles, are rich in magnesium and iron, and both form gas bubbles in them. Now, I put this picture of a champagne bottle being cracked open and the champagne bursting out. And of course, when it's in the bottle under pressure, the gas remains in solution in the liquid. And this is very much the case with lavas. And lavas contain massive amounts of gases, most of them nasty things. We have carbon dioxide, water vapor, steam, sulfur dioxide, chlorine, and hydrogen sulfide, for example, some real nasty things. And they remain in solution within the lava, but as soon as it gets near to surface and it's reaching almost atmospheric pressure, the gases expand. And if they don't escape from it, they form bubbles within the lava, which are called vesicles. And in other words, there's accommodation space within the lavas for some minerals to come in and grow at a later stage. And if those vesicles are filled, that they're called amygdales. Just two terms. That's a sort of term comes from meaning a sort of almond-shaped cavity. And then some agates can form within fissures like ore minerals can. We're called vein agates, and a good locality for that is Burnan in Ayrshire, which we'll see examples of. And this is a picture I've taken in Roy's collection. They're both the same specimen from different angles. And I think it's a really good example, this showing how one of these gas bubbles has so-called frozen in the lava as it's cooled down. The gas has expanded from next to nothing, formed this big bubble within it. It's a real bubble shape, both inside and outside, and has subsequently been lined by quartz, forming a quartz geode in this case. And this specimen is from the Barras quarry near Stonehaven, one of the more, well, virtually the most northerly agate sites in that area. And then I'm not going to labour this, it's just really to point out here that the mineralogy itself of agates is very simple, really. We have this sardonyx, which is a mica group mineral, and but it forms like clay masses, and it seems a bit of a strange thing to think that that's in our agates, but we can see examples later where I think it clearly is. And if you just look at this picture I've put in on this one here, I know it seems a bit strange because actually these are tourmaline crystals in it, and it's from a locality called Glen Bucket in Aberdeenshire. But interesting, you get a lot of these specimens with thick layers of this seledenite in, and it always reminds me when I've collected it of almost like the texture and appearance of marzipan that you'd put on your Christmas cake. That sort of hopefully conveys its texture and fineness to you if you were to find a piece. And then, of course, a major constituent, obviously, the major thing in agates is silica or silicon dioxide. And although it has to where it's sourced from in a lot of these things and the means of formation is still very unclear. So it's a real sort of, contrast. The mineralogy of agates is really remarkably simple, but the structure is it's just far from described as yet. There's many theories coming in now, but they're probably one of the most complicated things to explain in mineralogy virtually. It's quite amazing. And then finally, I've put this, other things can be found in them. I've said sardonytic growths, which we'll see examples of, which is more like a circular crystallized minerals within the silica structure, or trapped of detritus, sand, ash, and mud. I've put examples on. And again, these become apparent when you look at specimens. So now we're going to get to some sort of nice pictures that David's kindly let me have, looking at structures. And basically, agates fall into these two main structures: wall banding, which this is an example here where it follows concentrically with the shape of the specimen, and level banding, which we see here in this. And these are the two main sort of distinct categories. Now, with level banding, I've just put these, you'll hear it mentioned, lots of other things: water level banding, horizontal, gravitational, parallel, and even Uruguay. They all mean the same thing. It's this sort of structure. And in this structure too, you get two, or you'll hear of two sorts. You hear of onyx and sardonyx. And they both level banding, so there's no change in morphology in those two, but it's really just terms to do with colour. So onyx is typically used to describe black and white bands, and sardonyx reddish brown with perhaps other colours mixed in. But that's the basic sort of summarization of that. But within the wall banding, there's lots of different types, and I don't know. I've just from my own knowledge, I've highlighted the ones in yellow to say these can be found in Scotland. Probably dendritic can be as well, but I've not come across them, and I've not come across lace agates either. But again, I stand to be corrected, and maybe Michael, who's joined us, could pass comments on that at the end. One thing I've not put here is picture agates, which is, that hooded owl at Munich. That would fall into that category. And I think I've got one in my collection, which of all things looks a bit like a giant squid. So I guess we could have picture agates in that category too. So starting off, and I think this is a remarkable one, and one I don't have in my collection. Incidentally, I've put a picture of whatever the real thing is first in each of these slides. Although in this picture, this bacon agate doesn't really look much different from the agates. I think they're quite remarkable. And I think if you sat down with one of these on a plate with some chips and an egg on it, you might be tempted to tuck in. I think they're just remarkably amazing things. And I believe these are quite a new sort of find and found on the Ayrshire coast. I think they're fabulous things. I think we all know of eye agates because you see these from all around the world, and beautiful things. I think it's interesting to see these three along the bottom are all three-dimensional specimens. They're more pebbles of some sort that have been polished to show the eyes beautifully. And this one from Barras Quarry, again at near Stonehaven, has been sawn and polished to show the structures. Quite often when you do see these eyed agates, they do often form around the edges, and then the banding, the wall banding flows round them. But in this case, you've got that and then another generation of eyes within it. And as I mentioned before, when you look at many of these things and try to begin to form a history of how they formed, it really does push your thoughts to the very limit that they're staggering. I think flame agates are gorgeous things, and here's a lovely variety of them from various localities. I think the big one in the middle, the blue one, reminds me of the cooking on gas advert. But again, what variety? And I think this is a key feature in Scottish agates, that the colours are so subtle. They're often not loud colours, and they blend in and are pastel colours. And again, they just make beautiful specimens. I particularly like this one. I think it's just a gorgeous thing. Fortification agates are named, as the name implies, after forts. I don't think you often realise if you're on the ground looking at a fort, but quite often if you see an aerial photo of them, and here's a great example from in Aberdeenshire, that some part of them, the outer walls, form like a star, a stellate shape, basically so you could shoot or fire an arrow in any direction at anyone attacking it. But that sort of stellate or sharply jagged edged appearance is often reflected in some of these agates rather than flowing smooth bands. And here are two examples of fortification style. Of course, we have moss agates now, and here again, you can begin to see now in this seledonite, the mica mineral, the one I said was like marzipan often when you find it. This is inclusions of this within the silica, and it sort of muddies the waters, but produces these beautiful examples where the silica will be transparent or translucent, and it gives this effect of like seaweed or moss under a layer of water. Landscape agates are incredibly famous, and a great area for these is the sort of Montrose down to Lunan Bay area on the east coast. And the famous place for them is this fabled blue hole. I'll leave off saying a little bit about that until a few slides later, I think. But this example at the top is with permission from the National Museum Scotland, ex-Robert Ferguson collection. And again, you just look at it, and really when you get your eye in it, you feel, you could be like sat in a sort of sea cave looking out with the waves breaking and the horizon and a misty sky and sunset. And, to think nature has produced this it's just incredible. And they are amazing things. I know these aren't as expressive, but, we can, they're going that way a bit. They are beautiful. Stalactitic agates, as the name implies, looks like stalactites, and they form these sorts of pendulous curtains hanging down. This specimen from Norman's Law in Fife, which is a great locality for these stalactitic ones, it almost looks as if we're looking into almost like a geode here, as if this goes in, but it's not. It's a solid thing sawn through. And these areas here are just a lot translucent than the material here, and it just looks as if they're stalactites forming in a cavern. Norman's Law produces amazing specimens like this. one of the most rare, and I would imagine one of the rarest agates in the world, never mind Scotland, are these whirl agates from the Ross of Mull. And believe you me, these things are like hen's teeth. And what amazing things. And I will not pass any more comment on that because I've got some super examples just to show you near the end of the presentation. So having done that, that gives you a good flavour of all the sort of internal morphologies we tend to see throughout Scotland. I'm sure there are others, but that gives a good summary, I hope. And now we're going to look at some localities. There are endless localities. And I must admit, I'm not familiar with many of them. I tend to have done this more from specimens I have in my own collection, though again we're not seeing those. And certainly on the East Coast, places I have visited as well. So we'll start off on the East Coast and move down from Barras, which is up here, and along the coast down to Dundee and our Downey and Ethybeaton quarries here. And then we'll head west via Perth, past Kinnoul Hill, which is a good site, and over to Ayrshire, and then across to Kintyre. And we'll finish with one or two real rares that occur in these areas too. So again, just let me emphasize, nearly every one of these photos of agates is courtesy of David Anderson, and my immense thanks to him. And again, they're just agates of the highest quality that he has or has photographed. So here we are at Barras Quarry. It's also known as Cotbank Quarry at Brooksea Hill near Stonehaven on farmland. And the farmer's always very, if you ask for permission, is usually accommodating. And this is a famous Scottish collector, Bob Sutherland, collecting in this photograph here. And you can just see, I don't have to describe them, but the diversity of specimens from this one quarry, ranging from banded with the mixture of banded and onyx in it. This one that almost has it has a texture of and look of fine porcelain, really, when you see such specimens. And these with what I imagine are traces of iron staining passing through them. I think before I forget to say, and this is as good a place as any to pass this comment, if you do get agates, and particularly from Scotland, do make sure they're labelled well as for locality, because of the diversity at most sites. If you get them mixed up, it's a lost cause really to where to reassign them. There's very few sites where they're pretty distinct, and you could take a pretty certain guess and say, right, that was from such a place. Middlefield Farm is an example we'll see. But most, I say, if you mix them up with others, you wouldn't stand a chance to sort them. So do ensure they're well labelled. Moving down a little towards Montrose is St Cyrus, where they occur in the cliffs there, and quite vertical cliffs. But again, showing the diversity here and very beautiful things. I like these subtle ones, like on the left. And very sadly, I just forget the name, but a well-known collector in the area who was very experienced was collecting on the cliffs, and there was a fall many years ago now, and unfortunately was killed. A real tragedy. So it just shows you how careful you've got to be if you're collecting in such a situation. Moving down to Montrose, and we put this little inset map showing the town itself there, and then these two really famous localities, Ferryden and Skerdyness. and you can see lots of specimens from these. And again, the diversity is staggering. You don't hardly see two alike. So just look at those and enjoy the sort of more a flame structure on the right. Just look at the fineness of the banding there that occurs in that one on the right. How many layers and the sort of process that has caused that to occur. It is quite staggering, really. And again, with probably this micaceous sort of celadonite forming this rim to the right of this specimen here. Here we are more from Skerdines. Don't really need any explanation, just enjoy the beauty of them and the subtlety of the colours. Again, the subtlety of those blues and mauves in the right one, just amazing. And then as we moved a little south from Montrose, we encountered all these incredibly, they're just legendary names in the agate world, really. And the first one is that gives its full-time fish town of Usen. And this is a picture on one of my visits there of what it looks like and all the pebbles on the beach. And we're getting into real sort of famous territory now and getting near to somewhere where this famed blue hole existed. This is just a picture. I'm no experience at collecting agates. What I tend to find, quite like my mineral collecting too, it's nothing great to shout about, but I have found them here. And even though they're not too great, it's very exciting to have found and collected some myself rather than just bought them all. And this is an example. These are some here on the left that I picked up on this particular day, which I noted was exactly 10 years ago this month when I collected these, and things that I hoped might have agates in. I don't personally have any sewing facilities, so I sent them down to Robin Field, who sadly has passed away now. I think he passed away about 2 years ago. But he and his wife lived in Kendal and were great collectors and also sold agates. We'll see some pictures of those towards the end. And Robin kindly saw all these. And then this is a photo he took of them to send me to make if I wanted them polished or not. So that's how I tended to have mine cut and polished by Robin if I found any worth doing. Moving a little sort of heading south further still, here's Usen, and we're heading down the coast. Montrose is just up here. We're heading down towards Elephant Rock, which is this rock here, a little like cliff promontory, and you can see the back and hind and front legs of the elephant there, and its face there, I think, and its trunk coming down. So that's that, and that's a very nice walk along this coastline down to Bodin Point and then through onto Lunan Bay if you continue south. And these pictures are just they're only small, but they're very nice, a little geode and a little fortification agate, actually in Elephant Rock. I didn't collect them. It seemed a crime to do it. I hope they're still there. And that's a close-up of the previous one I just showed. So I say not very big, but very, lovely, and lovely to see it in situ as well. As you walk along that stretch of coast and look down to the sea, there are the remains of this small cottage. You can just see the walls and one of the gable ends here. And it's said that this belonged to the hermit who was the collector at the Blue Hole. And Matthew Foster Heddle had a wonderful collection of Blue Hole agates, some of which are shown here in that Munich display the Royal Museum of Scotland put on. And I was interested to see when I was putting this presentation together that the Royal Museum has put on here, if you can read it, Blue Hole 3.2 kilometers southeast of Montrose. Now, I'm not dead sure how that is known, because as far as I know, no one knows where that locality is now. I have heard some people think it was out in the sea, that you could only access at a very extreme low tide. I think some people think it was in a railway cutting that was made somewhat inland on the main line south. And there are other localities cited, but it has never been rediscovered, sadly. But it's so a real enigma, this, and these sort like hen's teeth again, if you almost impossible to get. Just to give you a feel of the countryside, it's a beautiful coastline. And both of these pictures are sort of looking north along the same stretch of coast from the sort of Bodding Point area up towards Euston and Elephant Rock, that direction. And really, you've got two choices if you go. You can take a very nice stroll along the beach and look amongst the pebbles here for agates, or you can do a similar one along the cliff top. This is all farmland, but as long as you just keep to the edge, and quite often, if they've just turned over the field, you can spot pieces in the soil all along this coast, and it's a coastal path, so it's really lovely to nice walk and perhaps a few little agates en route. This is just a trip I made to around the Bodding Point area, and a friend of mine collecting there. And I remember well that I found a reel just digging in these pebbles, and of course it wet once you move the surface away, finding a really nice eye agate amongst them. And at Bodding Point itself, these are old lime kilns there, where they used to produce lime. And as a byproduct of it, that as a waste product, any jasper nodules were just dumped virtually just down here in the sea, clear of it. And they were a great, beautiful to look at. But the last time I went here, sadly, that they'd all been removed, and it is thought that someone like from a garden centre has been and whipped them all, which is a tragedy. And then just moving a little further south, we've got Lunan Bay, which is a spectacular bay where agates can be found again in the sort of dune areas. And this is a collecting trip I did some time ago with some of you might know Alan Barnes. He lives up in Northumberland, and the famous and great Ralph Sutcliffe was with us that day. Again, Ralph's no longer with us now, but was one of the most famous British mineral dealers, of course. So from Lunan Bay, here's a selection of more onyx or sardonyx agates, some with the wall banding in, and some with a few eyes I notice here. So again, a lovely sort of cross section of what can be found. And then I'm sort of, just to jolt everyone, I'm relocating vastly here. I perhaps should have started with this one, but this is a real sort of unusual locality. Now, we mentioned before Peatfold, Glen Bucket, and this is famous for its elbaite tourmaline locality. And this is a trip we had here. This is myself and Ian Dossett, photographed by John Davidson in 2003 at Glen Bucket, looking for tourmaline. And this is west of Aberdeen here. But I've just put those in. Typically, this is the sort of beautiful tourmaline you can find if you're lucky, and quartz crystals. But on a subsequent trip I had, and it was with Don Alderson, who you'll sometimes remember from ISIS Minerals, we found some agate specimens in the pegmatites there, which I thought were rather nice. And so it's just a sort of nice, unusual locality, this to have an agate from. So I just thought I'd put that in as a little sort of unusual locality. And then back on the trail down, really should have put that at the first, I realise now. But anyway, carrying on south of Lunan Bay quite a bit, we get down to Dundee. And two quarries we've mentioned before are Downey and Etherbeaton, both of which are still operating quarries, but on the whole have passed through the agate-bearing ground and no longer produce them on the whole. I think some may be found now and again, but the glory days seem to be over. But the quarry owners were very accessible for collecting, and very good attitude indeed. And again, I'll just whip through some. You can see what beautiful things these are. These are from our Downey. And this is a good point to point out if you're not familiar with them. Sometimes in an agate like this, you get, and you can see sort of these sort of bands here, and it's called shadow banding. And it occurs if you get a finely structured wall banding like this, and a decent amount of, well, either transparent or good translucent silica in between. So you've really got, you're looking into the specimen between these layers, so there's depth involved too. And the distribution of the bands interferes with light, and you get this very strange sort of shadowing passing through the layers three-dimensionally as you tilt the specimen in the light, and it's quite remarkable to see a good one. It's you can't put it down really. It's quite fascinating, the effect. Again, one's from our Downey. Just look at the diversity here. And again, just remember that I said about if you get them mixed up, there's no turning back, you know. It is not obvious they're all from the same location. I put that in because I just think the complexity of the banding is breathtaking. And again, with these, again, all our Downey note. And can you imagine that nature produces so many? There really doesn't seem to be two similar ones in the same place, really. It's amazing. And here next door, you saw how close those two quarries were. They sort of within spitting distance, really. These are from Etherbeaton. More from then. And again, these with the sort of texture and look of porcelain. I think these are beautiful things. More of the same. A friend of mine looked at this one and said it's true. It sort of almost looks like a scene out of Star Trek or something, looking into a galaxy of or a nebula, I should say, really. Just complex and amazing. Near to Dundee is this locality, Middlefield Farm, and as I alluded to before, this is one of the localities where you could, if you did get them mixed up, you could take a pretty good guess they were from here, because they tend to be this sort of orange or yellow colour. Again, great diversity, but quite strikingly similar in many respects. And again, more from Middlefield Farm. I particularly love these with the oranges and strong yellows in them. I think they're amazing. Sadly, I have nothing like that, and I would love to get hold of something like that. Now we're going to head across the country west, and heading that way via Perth, along the A90, if you've travelled that way, you will not have forgotten it. This marvellous, spectacular bit of landscape. Here it is on the OS map as you're driving along, with these precipitous cliffs above you at Kinnoul Hill and the Kinnoul Tower on top. There's a view of it, and that's the tower there, high up above the road. It really is a spectacular bit of countryside, this. And I've not collected here, but here's an example, and we'll see some on the next slide, of agates that are found along this cliff. But I believe that it's very bad terrain. It's like a boulder, very awkward boulders to cross with dense in vegetation, and probably the agates are buried under all the boulders, if anything. But it's not as easy as it might appear. But if you do get some, they're lovely and they're different. And there's a few examples from that locality. So over across now to Ayrshire, and I hate to confess this, but I've never been to Ayr, so this is new territory to me, really. But I do have specimens from here in my collection. But again, these are David Anderson's pictures and some remarkable things, showing different ones from like onyx and sardonyx to different wall and fortification banding there. More from Denure. Again, great diversity in them. I mean, just look at that one. That's just striking me a bit. You could get that mixed up with Middlefield Farm, definitely, but it is from Denure, and what a lovely thing that is too. The way it's horizontal gravity banded in there. Now, we mentioned Burnan before in Ayrshire, and this is an inland locality, and it's what's called a vein agate. And I think it's quite obvious in some of these, you can see these more unusual structures that we're not that familiar with that are formed in veins. You do get, of course, these, again, more conventional looking ones, but they are distinctive, these, definitely, and you tend to know a Burnan specimen when you see it. And then moving along the coast a little further south here, we have this area called Maidens. And I just love this one. Again, before I move on, just looking at the detail on that banding, how subtle and fine those lines are. Absolutely remarkable specimen. And I love this sort of mottled effect. It looks as if you've splattered fine paint droplets over it in the end, how this occurs. And again, another selection of the diversity of specimens from Maidens. That's definitely a more unusual one, the one on the bottom right there with colours we don't often see. And then people will perhaps be familiar with the picture here, the little inset of Culzean Castle on the coast. It's now a National Trust of Scotland property. And sort of one of the things it's famed for is that General Eisen, or President Eisenhower, used to holiday there often. It was a favourite haunt of his. But in the cliffs there, it's again, and this area, Turnberry, famous for the golf course, are these different agates. And again, once again, massive variety of them. Now moving across now to the Kintyre Peninsula, which is this little, well, not so little if you drive down it, a very long peninsula here. And I think it's only about 12 miles off Northern Ireland. In fact, this picture I've taken here, that is the Northern Ireland coast. You can see there in the distance on this beautiful day. And I think I'm right. I hope I've labelled this right. I think that's Ailsa Craig, that little island there, which was famous for the granite was used for curling stones in the past. But agates occur around this coastline, particularly at the end here. And also, here's one of these agates replacing a coral, which are an absolutely fabulous thing. Again, found on the shoreline along here. And I went many years ago with Don Alderson, say, who was ISIS Minerals, looking for agates. And I took these pictures. They sort of agate, you can see how it's going that way in the rocks, but impossible to get out. But it was just geologically interesting to see the sort of in situ formation that some of them are apparent. And again, as a selection from Kintyre, again, perhaps quite more unique and distinctive with these more reddish colours. And then I'm just ending with one or two really unusual things that David has supplied. And I think this one on the left is a gorgeous thing from the Shetland Isles. Just a rough piece picked up, but just imagine picking that up for a beautiful find. I think it's amazing. And then the one on the right is, of course, cut and polished. And this is one of these sardonytic agates, which you do get from in other localities around the world. And it tends to be some mineral. We don't really always know what it is, but it's formed within the silica and grown as like needle or as circular shaped crystals. And it's forming this beautiful array in the translucent silica within the specimen. I just put these in again to show close-ups of the coral agates. And just look at the presentation of the detail there on the right of the structures. Just really beautiful, remarkable things. I'd give anything to have one of those in my collection. I can tell you it's, but I'm sure they're not easy to come by. Those are two more of a different sort of a longitudinal section on the left there. And I put this in from selected from David's website, just of a specimen from the Ochil's area, which is sort of in the sort of Stirling, well, most people know the Stirling area, really. It's in an area you've heard of silver, the native silver from Alva, and a place called Tillicutri. It's sort of around that area it's from. And it's really just to show one in ordinary light. We've not talked about fluorescence at all, but here is one showing great fluorescence. One, the specimen on the left in ordinary white light, and then on the right in shortwave ultraviolet. And lots of totally different beast and showing great natural fluorescence. So my last bit on the agates before we get to just a final look at literature is, and it's a very quick look at one or two collections I've seen. Some of them quite small maybe, but I thought worth just sharing with you. And the first is that of Robin and Jean Field. I say, sadly, Robin's no longer with us now. But as I've said here in that third line, if you remember the UK Journal of Mines and Minerals, they used to have a classified ads section at the end, and they advertised as stratagems. And if you contacted them, you could drive up to Kendal, made very welcome, have a cup of tea with them and spend a very happy afternoon looking through the agates and choosing specimens for yourself at wonderful prices. And I've got to say, Robin was an absolute master at cutting and polishing them. we've all seen a badly cut and polished agate, and believe you me, there were none that Robin supplied. He really had got the technique off to a fine art, and uh, I feel very privileged to have met them on a few occasions, and I've got some great specimens of them. And they kept this is their own personal collection. There were one or two others scattered around the room, but this was the main core of the collection, and they were very, very strict. They had a one in, one out policy, so it never grew at all. But it was if you looked in that cabinet carefully, that there every single thing was a very choice item, and this picture I took, I just don't think it does it justice, because yeah, you can see they look nice, but maybe you look at them and think, well, there's nothing that special there or on the whole. But believe you me, when you were there and you actually examined them closely, they were all absolutely top-notch things. So yeah, great people to have met. And these were two in little other side cabinets which I just adored. And I particularly love this one on the left here, this moss agate from Tayport. Sadly, I couldn't get a better picture of it, but I really think you can see that sort of, it looks like, I don't know about moss, it looks like fronds of seaweed in a rock pool, really. I think it's a gorgeous thing. And again, a really great sardonyx agate. Sadly, they weren't, it is a Scottish one. They weren't labelled, and I didn't ask where it was from. So it is known where it's from, but it's not known to me, I'm afraid. This is this isn't a collection. This is specimens for sale, but this is I think virtually the last place Ralph Sutcliffe lived before he had to go into a care home, because I think he suffered from dementia over the last 2 or 3 years, sadly. But this is where I used to visit Ralph to buy other specimens, not just Scottish agates, but this was his showroom. And these would tend to be more north of England and West Cumbria specimens, but this cabinet you can just see appearing here. I kind of just point out that the stairs go up at this side of the house, so that's why I could get a high up photo. This cabinet here is this one shown here, and it was mainly just Scottish agates, and all for sale. And which I hasten to add, I think mainly he'd bought off Robin and Jean Field, if the truth be known, and relabeled them. But anyway, he'd got a good eye, and he certainly selected great specimens. And it was everyone for sale, and it was an absolute feast to go through. The trouble is, I look at these pictures now and think, why on earth didn't I buy that one or that one? Sort of. I just can't understand why I didn't choose some of the others. I know I didn't select, but hey ho, that's life, I guess. And even that one, I thought, being familiar now with bacon agate, I thought that looked a little baconish, sort of. But again, sadly, I didn't buy that one. But it was a great selection of stuff he had. And always a very pleasant stay with Ralph. Another little encounter, and it was the day that Alan Barnes and Ralph and I went to Lunan Bay, and we called in the lovely museum at Montrose. And at the time, I think it was on for about 3 or 6 months, something like that, this Lord Grey agate exhibition in 2011. And again, sorry, my photos aren't very good. I think I've got it not on flash, and hence they've come out a little bit blurry. But it just gives a flavour of. I should have looked up who Lord Grey was. I think he lived in the area, and they have his collection now. But just interesting. And this first little selection is labelled agates as found in the field, so nothing, not sawn or anything. And then a selection of fortification and eye agates. Again, I think they're mainly from the Montrose area, these. And I'm really showing them because I say it was a temporary exhibition. I don't think they're on show now after all this time. A selection of moss and stalactitic, and then onyx is on the right. And then some druzy quartz centers, which are, if they're not complete, are more of a geode, as we see here. And then a selection of nice jaspers on the right, which is pretty good. I say that's just like the pebbles you used to be able to find at Bodden Point there by the lime kilns, but I say they're no longer there now, annoyingly. I just put this little one in, not much to show here, but the castle at Braemar, when Roy Starkey was working on his book on the Cairngorms Crystal Mountains, he was doing research here, there, and everywhere. And on visiting Braemar Castle, he came across a long forgotten little mineral collection with some very nice material in. Of course, Roy was mainly concentrating on the Cairngorms and such minerals at the time, but amongst them, and I hasten to add, if I just move back, he organized and had these posters made, and between him and Mary did all this exhibition, which was in Braemar Castle, and absolutely delightful to see. And amongst that cabinet were just these few examples of local, well, Montrose agates probably. And I've just put blown up pictures of those three here to show you them. And again, this lovely pebble jewellery brooch with the agates and a cairngorm in the middle. Really lovely things. And again, I've included that because although it's not a great deal to see, I suspect that's no longer on show now at Braemar. It may be, but I'm not sure. And then finally, and okay, these are mine now, and again, pretty poor pictures of them. But these are some of the whirl agates from the Ross of Mull. Now, the reason I put these in, don't get me wrong, I'm delighted to have them, and they're really sort of quite nice. And they're small ones, but I'm delighted to have them because I say they're not easy to get. But these were collected by Mike Forster, who did a lot of walking and field work on the Ross of Mull. But I put them to show you, to set a sort of benchmark of how good the ones I'm going to show you now that Steve Warren has in his collection, which he bought from Mike Foster. So having seen these of mine, you'll now realize how fabulous the one Steve acquired. Here is Mull, just off the west coast. And this is on this peninsula here. This is the Ross of Mull towards, well, if we can do the pointer right here, just at the end, this is this part here. And on the beaches, very rarely these agates are found and recognized. And this picture here is an exhibition Steve put on at last year's Russell ASM of these he'd just acquired, and they were mind blowing. I suspect these are the best examples of whirl agate in the world. I know Mike Rumsey was there, and Rachel from the Royal Museum in Edinburgh, and both said that neither museum had specimens as good. Again, just showing you the beautiful landscape of the Ross of Mull here. And I put this in because I thought this was it is a remarkable thing. Again, in Steve's exhibition last year, one of the things he was able to acquire of Mike Foster was this one here, which I believe Mike almost threw away, I think. And it is just as found, I believe, on the beach. But it shows you basically, excuse me, how these things are formed in these sort of nodular concretions of agate, almost like pearl-like. But then this one has not been completed, where these have been infilled with silica, and when you saw it through, this is the effect you get. but I think this is quite a unique specimen, sort of giving us a possible clue to how the world ones occur. It's a beautiful thing. And then just for tonight's talk, I was speaking to Steve about this, and he's very kindly let me have these nice photos. This was the selection and of some of the ones we've just seen that he now owns. And these are as Mike Foster displayed them, like in a little nest, really, when Mike originally owned them. And just going through, these are three pictures Steve has supplied me with. First of all, you can see the world scene, and again, a bit of sort of like onyxy type material within it. And then a really quite a complex thing with a massive whirl here. Note the sizes here, quite complex. And then finally, this magnificent one, which I really think there's nothing like it. And these have been collected, as Mike has said, through hundreds and hundreds of walks along the beach and just occasionally recognizing something. But it's the sort of area that if you went to just once, you probably wouldn't stand a chance of coming across anything, I imagine. So just a very quick sum up in if this has got your juices flowing on Scottish agates and you feel you're becoming a bit of a fan. Of course, we must start off in the book department with Matthew Foster Heddle's classic Mineralogy of Scotland in two parts, where he has a fantastic section on agates. I've shown you some of the title index here of context, and with lots of super illustrations showing. And this is just a selection from many more that's in the book. And although admittedly the books are, well, not that easy to get hold of and are pretty expensive now, they are available on the web free of charge. Just look it up and you'll find a PDF copy of both volumes. And this is where I've taken these pictures from. So that's a great instant free resource for anyone to look at. I put these three in. These are three books I've got from very younger days, three classic books on agates, two of them from the Natural History Museum. And I'll just point out this one. It's not a very thin book. It's in that series that you'll be familiar with, like on the story of the Earth and meteorites and crystals and whatnot. And in the remarkable books, although they're not very thin and they're quite basic, if you read one, you're all the wiser for doing it. So I do recommend that, even though at first sight it looks perhaps a sort of oversimplification, that they are pretty great. I've got to say this one, this is like the all-time classic one now on Scottish agates by the David Anderson, who supplied tonight's pictures, as you know, and sadly the late Nick Crawford. And this is a fabulous book, absolutely fabulous, and I recommend it if you can get it. That's the back cover of it, just to give you a lovely juicy temptation of what it contains. And quite remarkably, because I think particularly in the next gen will be aware of this, books are not as popular as they used to be. Most mineral books you can't get a penny for if you want to sell them. But this one has bucked the trend. And I'm delighted to say I contacted Nick back in 2011, I think shortly after it had been published, and bought it direct from him for $14.99, which was the cover price, and damn good value as well, I've got to say. But if you look on the net, and these are legitimate prices, well, there we are. It's some increase from $14.99, and then another one at $295, I see. And finally, unbelievably, from ABE Books, $399. So it's almost getting as expensive as an original Heddle copy. So it's quite remarkable, but it just shows you how it's gone down. It is a fabulous book if you can get your mitts on one. these are the three publications by Bode in Germany. And one of them, I think it's the Agates too, if I remember rightly, has quite a good section on, or a little section, which is quite nice on agates and modern collecting at Burnham too. I think it's number 2. So those are, and then all the other localities in those are worldwide localities. These are a great couple of books by Terry Moxon, trying to sort of understand more how the complexity of how agates form, which, as we can see from tonight's selection, is quite mind-blowing and a lot to get your brain round. And anyone in the Russell Society will have, we have our monthly Zoom talks, and we were lucky enough in 2024 to have Marco Campos Venuti speak on some books he's published and all his research work on the thoughts he's had and theories on the formation of agates. And that was an incredible presentation. Sadly, it wasn't recorded, so there isn't a record of it. But these are just some screenshots I took, and the whole lecture was full of these amazing, information-rich diagrams that he'd done, which are contained in this set of 3 books you can buy, and you can order those direct from him on the web. And you also get a good discount if you order all 3 at once. So again, well worth having to, for theories on agate formation in all parts of the world. It's his thought processes are quite staggering. He certainly thinks out of the box, I can tell you. And I think almost finally, just 1 or 2 websites that you might visit. Emily Brown at the in Edinburgh, she's done a good video on Scottish agates, and just another couple I've come across down here. If you want to, Shanice is recording this anyway, so you can pick this information up from the recording unless you take a screenshot. And well worth looking at, very interesting. And then last but not least, I'm just going to drop in, it's a bit of a plug this, but John Ruskin, who I think most people will have heard of, a great, one of the great Victorians, polymath in many subjects, famous as an art critic and writer, and one of the great drivers behind the Pre-Raphaelite movement, which if I put a couple of pictures I've dug out of Pre-Raphaelite paintings, you'll be familiar with them. I'm sure there's almost photographic quality. And John Ruskin was a great mover and shaker in that movement. What a lot of people don't know, that his personal passion throughout his life, from a young boy to his death, was mineralogy. And he had a fabulous personal collection. And I have actually handled a lot of these specimens in the past, and have done a lot of research on them, but in great detail now. And as some will be aware, Roy Starkey has been researching this now for about the last 4 or 5 years, and is just about to, the book is getting very near to publication. And it's going to be a fabulous thing on John Ruskin and his life in mineralogy, his personal life and his collection. And I just put this as a plug for Roy, because you know what his other books have been like. They've been spectacular. And he's offering at the moment, if you go to this website address at the bottom and to his website and look at this flyer, if you are prepared to commit yourself to buy a copy, which I think is going to be £40, just check with Roy. He will put your name will be printed in the subscribers list at the beginning of the book, like they used to do in olden days, which is quite a nice touch. And I can guarantee it'll be well worth obtaining for that money, I'm sure. So thank you very much. I'm afraid I've gone over sometime my allotted time, but I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you very much.